Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a slow, dusty stroll through the soft-lit corridors of an ancient Sumerian library, yes, a real one, where the clay tablets outnumber the chairs, and the rules about napping are stricter than the rules about reading. The air smells faintly of baked mud, burnt incense, and something like warm sheep wool. You're not wearing shoes, because no one's allowed to. The librarian priest eyes you warily, as if your footsteps might scratch the sacred floor. And the moment you sit down, you're already 5 minutes late for mandatory nap time. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the sun-baked courtyard of the temple complex in Lagash, a Sumerian city that smells like roasted onions, river dust, and whatever's fermenting in the priest's corner barrel. You've been sent on a noble errand: retrieve a tablet for your cousin who forgot the date of his barley tithe and might accidentally donate his neighbor's harvest. Easy enough, you think. Until you see the library. 2 hulking doors loom ahead, made of cedar wood darkened by centuries of handling and storm-soaked seasons. Carved onto their surface are scenes of Enlil bestowing knowledge upon scribes, each scribe depicted with a look of nervous terror. Just before you push the door open, a robed librarian priest steps out and gently clears his throat. "Do you intend to enter the House of Records?" he asks, with your sandals still touching your feet. You sheepishly peel them off and leave them beside a cracked limestone lion who's probably eaten better sandals than yours. Barefoot, you pad across smooth, sun-warmed stone and into the library. It's quiet in a way that makes you instantly regret breathing. The kind of silence that hovers mid-air, watching you. Clay shelves stretch from wall to wall, stacked with labeled tablets. The labels are written in cuneiform on tiny clay tags, each tied to the shelves with coarse string made from reeds or goat hair. No one is speaking, not even the librarian who's clearly trying to sneeze without making a sound. You step forward. The floor beneath you creaks slightly, though it's made of stone. Probably the ghosts of miscatalogued tablets. The air is dim but dappled with light beams filtering in through carved lattice windows. Dust floats in the light like ancient dandruff. At the front desk, or what passes for it, a squat alabaster table with one disapproving stool, sits an elderly man who seems to be made entirely of folds. His robe is too large, his scroll ringlets too many, and his eyebrows look like they contain their own scrolls. He raises a hand, not in greeting, but in evaluation. "State your business," he murmurs. "And your family lineage. And whether you've recently consumed onions." You answer as best you can, though you leave out the onion flatbread you snuck before entering. His eyebrows twitch, detecting your lie. He says nothing, only gestures toward the tablet request alcove, a dim hallway flanked by 2 statues of birds with oddly human ears. You pass between them, instinctively ducking, and find a low bench where others are waiting. No one is talking. One scribe in training is humming softly, until a younger librarian clears her throat and hands him a nap token. Yes, nap tokens. You've heard rumors: every patron of the House of Records is expected to take 1 nap every 4 hours. No exceptions. Even the owls. You watch as the young scribe grumbles, takes the token, and pads off toward the back of the library where the nap mats are laid out in uneven rows like strange offerings. A clay tablet on the wall reads, "Napping is sacred. Dreams are data. Snoring is impolite." You don't quite know what to make of it. But before you can wonder further, your name is called, not your personal name, but the 5-part ceremonial name that includes your mother's cooking preference and the approximate angle of the moon at your birth. You're guided to a row of narrow storage cubbies stacked with tablets. The librarian hands you one marked with the symbol for barley, and a smaller sub-symbol that historians still argue might mean tax, or might simply mean don't spill things on this. As you cradle the tablet in your hands, you feel a sense of strange reverence. It's heavier than it looks, dense with words, pressed with stylus lines that are still slightly raised after centuries of baking. You carry it like you're holding a sleepy cat, cautiously, respectfully, and slightly unsure whether it's going to judge you. You return to the reading area and carefully lower yourself onto one of the straw benches. The mat beneath you rustles as though it's alive. Probably it is. Possibly with beetles. As you begin to read, slowly tracing the symbols with your finger, because that's how they taught you in school, and because it gives your brain something to do while your eyes get sleepy, you notice something carved faintly into the edge of the tablet. It reads, "Do not remove from the house. Do not read aloud during eclipse. Do not dream of lions while holding this tablet." You blink. Whether that's a joke, or an ancient librarian's very serious concern, you don't know. But suddenly you feel like maybe, just maybe, you should nap first. You wake up to the soft clinking of clay bowls being stacked in the corner. Somehow, you've fallen asleep face down on a tablet inscribed with livestock regulations for southern canal districts. Thrilling stuff. A small string of drool connects your cheek to the phrase, 2 goats per barley row. No one says anything. In fact, no one seems to mind. Here in the temple library, naps are not only expected, they're strictly enforced. The same elderly librarian from earlier, the one with the origami eyebrows, glides over and places a small reed token in your palm. "Well done," he whispers. 12-minute nap. Acceptable. Your dream will be recorded shortly. You sit up slowly, trying to make sense of what that means. Before you can ask, he shuffles away, muttering something about dream quotas and lunar filing systems. You stretch your legs, which have gone slightly numb from the straw bench. Around you, the library is beginning to stir. One of the younger scribes yawns theatrically while reaching for a bowl of date paste, and another rearranges his writing styluses by order of mood, angry, hopeful, bored, and so on. You decide it's time to actually borrow the tablet you were sent to find. But not so fast. A clay placard near the alcove reads, "No shoes. No scrolls without ritual handwashing. No excuses." Next to it sits a large ceramic basin shaped like a frog. Its open mouth dribbles a slow trickle of water. Above it, a dangling cord of dried figs and feathers presumably serves as either decoration or punishment. You dutifully wash your hands in the frog basin, noting how cold the water is and how strangely sticky the stone feels. There's a brief moment where you consider drying your hands on your tunic, but a sharp ahem from a watching attendant convinces you otherwise. A small towel, worn thin from centuries of obedience, is handed to you, and you pat your hands dry like you're afraid to offend it. The actual process of checking out a clay tablet is less like visiting a modern library and more like getting married to a piece of mud. First, you must recite your full identification chain, name, occupation, last meal, and favorite bird, for security purposes. Then the attendant matches your answer with a wax-sealed scroll of patrons. Once matched, she nods and signals for the scroll witness, a second priest, this one clad in white linen and bearing a stylus made from the tail feather of a very annoyed ibis. The witness sits you down at a low stool carved with fish and hands you the registration slate. It's a medium-sized tablet already pressed with several rows of cuneiform. At the bottom is a blank line where you must add your personal mark. Not a signature, no, those are too easy to forge, but a symbol that best reflects your current emotional state and relationship to the requested knowledge. You consider your options. Mild dread with curiosity is a bit too long to carve. A goat being surprised by a falling fruit might be more accurate. You settle on a simplified version of hopeful headache, and the attendant nods, satisfied. Then, as the final part of the ritual, incense is lit. Not because anyone thinks the tablets need to be blessed, but because the reading room sometimes smells faintly of fermented onion broth, and the librarians like to pretend otherwise. Once the smoke curls through the air, a bell chimes, carved from bronze and etched with tiny stars. The tablet is officially yours, for the next 2 hours. You're handed it with both reverence and passive-aggressive slowness. It's warm from the shelf, its surface rough and pitted with centuries of fingertip history. And it's heavier than expected. Always heavier than expected. You cradle it like you're babysitting a volcanic loaf of bread. On your way back to the reading mat, you pass a young woman attempting to return a tablet. The attendant flips through her patron's slate and frowns. "Returned 1 hour late," he says gravely. "What did you dream last night?" She hesitates. "A goat, with wings. Flying over the city walls. Screaming." He sighs. "Very well. Recorded under anxious omens. Next time, return it on time." You blink. So that wasn't a joke. Dreams are, quite literally, the late fee system. Historians still argue whether this practice was spiritual, psychological, or just a way for bored priests to collect gossip under divine justification. Either way, it makes you hope you never return a tablet late. Your dreams mostly involve being chased by disapproving camels. You settle back onto your mat, tablet balanced on your knees, and begin reading. The script is surprisingly clear. Someone with a fine hand and even finer patience wrote this. It's all about canal maintenance schedules, seasonal barley assessments, and punishment protocols for irrigation misuse. Thrilling bedtime material. But here's the curious part. Scribbled in the corner is a faint, almost hidden glyph. It's a stylized eye with 3 lines coming out of it, an old symbol for witnessed but not believed. It wasn't part of the original text. Someone added it later. Was it a librarian's personal note? A scribe's private protest? Or just the ancient version of graffiti that reads, "This scroll lies"? Nobody knows. Scholars still debate whether marginal glyphs like this were commentary, satire, or early footnotes. You read on, occasionally pausing to stretch your wrists. Clay tablets don't turn pages, they just get heavier the longer you hold them. It's a very literal metaphor for knowledge being a burden. And just as your eyes begin to droop again, you notice a soft rhythmic bell in the background. Another nap cycle begins. Patrons rise slowly and shuffle toward the dream mats. One even brings his tablet with him, like a child with a bedtime story. You look around. No one protests. The library doesn't just allow naps, it orchestrates them like a religious rite. Maybe the ancients understood something we've forgotten, that rest isn't a break from learning, but part of it. You lie back once more, tablet at your side, head on your loosely folded robe. Just before you drift off, you hear the whisper of a librarian nearby. He dreamt of flying goats again. Put that under seasonal anxiety. And then, quiet, the dream comes in layers. At first, you're just floating, nothing to see, nothing to feel. Then a sound, like styluses scratching wet clay, begins to echo around you. Gentle at first, then louder. Then the texture of your dream shifts, and you find yourself back in the library, only it's larger now. Much larger. Endless rows of tablets stacked to the ceiling. A river flows through the aisles. A librarian rides a reed boat, filing tablets into hollow tree trunks. You wake up slowly, your cheek pressed into the floor mat, tasting faint hints of dust and dried lentils. Someone places a fig next to your hand. A quiet offering from the dream clerk. That's right, there's a dream clerk. He's a small man with exactly one eyebrow, permanently hunched as though listening for thoughts. His job is to wander the nap section with a wax tablet, documenting murmured dreams. He writes them in code, glyphs representing themes like lost teeth, unexpected rain, or argument with owl. It's not about privacy, it's about patterns. The high priests believe dream trends predict shifts in river flooding, trade winds, or incoming tax disputes. You munch the fig sleepily and rub your eyes. The dream recorders mutter nearby, and one of them sketches a particularly animated dreamer who seems to be fencing with an invisible fish. It's all very official. You finally rise and return your tablet to the reading bench. The sun outside the narrow windows has shifted, more golden now, casting a lattice of shadows across the library floor. The smell of warmed cedar fills the air. It's just past second nap. Second nap is when the temple begins its midday transition. Scribes unroll long scrolls to copy by torchlight, elders begin whispering over their alub root tea, and young students practice tablet painting, a decorative art that blends pigment with scripture. You wander toward the eastern alcove, where the shelves slope down slightly, just enough for rainwater to collect in the floor gutters, which are then carefully funneled to the temple garden. Here, you see the Quiet Master. Not a title you'd expect to exist, but in this library, silence is sacred. The Quiet Master is dressed in translucent linen and padded sandals. He never speaks. If someone raises their voice above the approved decibel range, he simply appears and offers them a small clay disc engraved with a sheep in repose. That's your warning. Get 3 sheep tokens in 1 moon cycle and you're assigned reflective duties, which usually means dusting 400 tablets with a squirrel fur brush while reciting canal tax codes from memory. You pass him slowly, nodding with exaggerated silence. He nods back and vanishes behind a papyrus curtain like a librarian-shaped shadow. But here's a little-known fact: Sumerian libraries weren't only repositories of laws and ledgers. They held stories too. And not just myths, but poems, riddles, even romance narratives. One particularly famous collection is known as the Cracked Reed Tales, a series of dramatic and often ridiculous love triangles involving grain merchants, astrologers, and a rather flirty moon goddess. You spot one such tablet perched behind a locked screen. Cracked Reed 7, The Boatman's Regret. A tiny heart is etched in the corner, and someone has doodled a sandal beside it. Scandalous. Historians still argue whether these stories were intended as parables or just ancient gossip disguised as literature. Either way, they were wildly popular. Some copies have been found with the corners worn smooth, not from age, but from generations of fingertips, rereading the same juicy stanzas. You're drawn toward a group of apprentices clustered around a slab. One of them, clearly the loudest, is animatedly reciting part of a poem from memory. She said his beard smelled of sesame. But she kissed him anyway. For he brought dates. And never asked for change. They all stifle laughter. The Quiet Master peers through the papyrus curtain, but this time, mercifully, no sheep token is issued. You grin quietly and continue exploring. In the far corner, near the room where sandals are stored during the high humidity season, there's a smaller reading room known as the Whisper Vault. The floor is packed clay, cool underfoot, and the walls are made of reed bundles soaked in bitumen for sound absorption. Inside, a scribe is teaching 2 younger pupils how to carve side patterns into their writing. It's an old tradition. Certain phrases, when etched with a subtle curve in the final wedge, are meant to be read with a faint sigh. It's like ancient punctuation for melancholy or gentle amusement. You lean against the frame and listen. One student recites a phrase. The grain was late again this year. And so was my brother's apology. The teacher nods and presses her stylus into the clay with a flourish. Don't forget the sigh, she says. No one wants to read a bitter line flat. Some historians believe this technique is the earliest known use of tone indicators in writing, centuries before emojis or sarcasm marks. Of course, there's no academic consensus. One school of thought insists the sigh marks were nothing more than scribal decoration. Another argues they held real performative weight, especially during recitations for visiting dignitaries. Whatever the truth, you find it oddly comforting that people once wrote clay poetry with emotional stage directions. As you step back into the main hall, a scent drifts toward you, burnt lentils and something vaguely spicy. A cart rolls by, its driver offering free focus snacks to patrons, dried chickpeas, fermented garlic balls, and sugared papyrus bark. You try a chickpea. It's crunchy. And just like that, it's nearly third nap. You haven't even finished your first tablet. Time moves differently here. Between naps, scrolls, dream analysis, and sigh marks, the library blurs into a soft, papery eternity. You've never learned so much while doing so little. Or done so little while feeling so learned. And there's a tablet calling your name from the Western Archive. You stretch once more and head that way, the clay cool under your feet, your eyes already feeling a little heavier than before. You're not even halfway to the Western Archive when the napping gong sounds again, a low, hollow thrum made by striking a giant clay drum suspended from a cedar frame. This signals optional nap time. Not mandatory, but strongly encouraged. Especially if you've been caught sighing too frequently or if your stylus hand has begun to twitch involuntarily, a sign of overscribing. You glance around and notice a few other patrons slinking off toward their preferred napping alcoves. There's a designated, light dozers, corner and a separate space for deep drifters. A tablet near the entrance helpfully reminds you, dreams composed near ink fumes may provoke visions of jackals. Noted. But before you succumb again to the call of slumber, you make a quick detour, past the reed rope racks, past the old man recopying tax legislation from 300 years ago, just for fun, and into the archive of administrative errors. Now here's where it gets truly delightful. This entire chamber is dedicated to documenting official mistakes, scribal blunders, and bureaucratic miscommunications. Every error is preserved, not erased. Sumerians believed mistakes were valuable teaching tools. Clay isn't like paper, you can't just crumple it and start over. If you mess up, you acknowledge it, maybe draw a fish beside the line as an apology, and keep going. You pick up one tablet and read. The goat count was overstated by 14. I was very sleepy. The goats were also misbehaving. At least they were honest. Another tablet shows a full record of a temple grain audit that had to be redone when someone accidentally wrote wheat instead of barley throughout. The scribe had tried to fix it by scratching little barley stalks into the margins like a decorative border. A noble effort. Historians still argue whether these were true errors or subtle critiques disguised as bloopers. One theory holds that certain scribes used humor, yes, ancient sarcasm, to highlight how unreasonable their workloads had become. A famous example is the Complaint of the Sand Counter, in which a junior clerk documents the futile task of counting individual sand grains after a strong southern wind swept through the granary. The final line reads, "The wind has more patience than the temple overseer." You snort softly. The tone is familiar, who hasn't had a boss like that? A faint breeze rolls in from a high window, carrying the smell of warm bricks and wet reeds. You lean against a sunlit column, watching a group of young novices playing tablet or turnip, a guessing game where you're blindfolded and must determine by touch whether you're holding a clay tablet or an especially dry root vegetable. The stakes? Who gets the extra honeyed yogurt cube during the next rest period? Eventually, you reach the Western Archive. It's the quietest part of the whole library, and the clay here feels older somehow, more brittle, more solemn. You tread carefully. This wing is devoted to city planning records and architectural drafts, including proposed, but never built, improvements to the napping chambers. One particularly ambitious scroll from 2350 BCE depicts an entire nap dome, cushioned with crushed rushes, cooled with rooftop water jars, and featuring soundproof reed walls. The funding, unfortunately, went to a ziggurat repainting project instead. Still, some reforms did make it through. It was in this archive, for instance, that the famous Clay Comfort Code was written, a set of guidelines that regulated how firm a nap mat could legally be. Too soft, and patrons became difficult to wake. Too hard, and complaints increased about sleep-shaped bruising. The code dictated a standard density using pressed lentils, and each mat was weighed bi-weekly by a mat auditor. Not a glamorous job, but highly respected. The mat auditor was even allowed to nap first, to test for irregularities. You ease down onto a bench to read the original code tablet. Its final line is particularly soothing. Let the nap be even. Let the dreams be symmetrical. Let no one drool excessively. The Sumerians, you realize, took their resting policies with both seriousness and sleepy charm. They believed balance in all things, especially between study and slumber, was the key to a well-ordered mind and society. And while there were certainly those who abused the system, napping too long or pretending to read while snoring behind a shelf, there were consequences. One rarely enforced but still fascinating rule was the nap for scroll exchange. If a patron exceeded their allocated snooze time, they were required to submit an original composition in return, usually a short poem, parable, or if particularly groggy, a haiku-length trade report. You find a few such submissions stored on a nearby shelf. One tablet reads, "Woke too late. Spilled ink on 3 barley requests. Forgive me, O moon god." It's unclear whether the moon god ever responded. In another corner of the Western Archive, you find something rare, a carved map showing the ideal nap layout for future libraries. The design is concentric, reading rooms surrounding napping circles, which in turn are surrounded by snack corridors and gentle sound walkways, featuring water drips and reed whistles. The outermost layer? A perimeter of cats. Yes, real cats, intended to keep snakes out and keep patrons cozy. There's even a scribbled note, if funding allows, ginger cat preferred for sunspots. Historians still debate whether this layout was a serious proposal or a utopian fantasy. Either way, it's clear the Sumerians imagined a future where knowledge and rest coexisted in harmony. The shadow of the library has shifted again. You rub your eyes and find a clay cup of cooled cumin tea beside you. Someone's been here while you read. Perhaps the dream clerk again, or maybe the mat auditor on her rounds. Either way, you take a sip and smile. There's more to discover. But maybe you'll lie down first, just for a moment. Just until the next gong doesn't come. Or at least, not yet. You find yourself curled near the western column, lulled by the rhythmic tap of a scribe's stylus striking wet clay somewhere in the corner. It's not loud, just soft, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat with a pen. You're not sure how long you've dozed when the librarian with the terracotta elbow pads appears again. She gives you a look, half amused, half expectant, and gestures silently to follow. And so you do. She leads you past a quiet corridor lined with statues, clay busts of famous Sumerian scribes, many of them mid-yawn or with fingers raised mid-sentence as if they just thought of the perfect synonym for grain tax. You pass under an arch inscribed with an old Sumerian proverb. Those who know sleep know wisdom, those who skip sleep miscount goats. Classic. Your destination? A lesser-known wing, the Department of Dream Documentation. Yes, they wrote dreams down. The Sumerians, it turns out, were borderline obsessed with dreams, not just the prophetic ones involving fish with human heads, but the everyday kind. If you dreamed about misplacing a stylus or turning into a pile of barley, it went on record. They believed dreams were a form of divine footnote, added by the gods after dusk. The Dream Documentation Wing is cooler than the rest of the library, both in temperature and vibe. The walls are dark and smooth, embedded with tiny glazed tiles that shimmer like starlight. Low reed lanterns glow with gentle light. There are padded stone seats here, designed for reclining while recalling last night's dreams under supervision. Yes, supervised dreaming was a thing. You perch on one such seat, and the librarian, her elbow pads now faintly glowing with mica dust, places a small tray before you. It contains a wet clay tablet, a stylus shaped like a bird's foot, a date palm cookie with a surprisingly modern hint of cinnamon. She gestures. Go on, try to remember. You close your eyes. Think back. You dreamt of walking down a hallway that kept stretching, walls turning into riverbanks, a scroll that unrolled forever, and a cat with earrings telling you the sun was late again. It makes no sense. But in this library, nonsense is data. You write it all down, slowly, laughing at yourself between stylus taps. Across from you, another patron is dreaming out loud into a reed funnel, which transfers her words into a sound tablet being etched in real time. Her dream involves a talking melon and a staircase made of soup. Respect. Historians still argue whether these recordings were purely therapeutic or if they had some secret administrative function. One theory proposes that the dreams were used to shape daily ritual calendars. Another insists it was all just proto-psychotherapy disguised as divine duty. Either way, the rules here are strict. Each visitor may record only one dream per nap, and the dream must be completed, no trailing off mid-description. If someone wrote, "I was flying and then and stopped," the scribe would follow up. You could even be fined a small amount of dried fig for incomplete vision submission. And don't even think about making your dreams up for entertainment. Fabricated dreams were frowned upon. In fact, there's a famous cautionary tale etched into a tablet along the back wall, The Boy Who Dreamed Too Much. In it, a teenager tries to win attention by claiming the storm god told him to eat more honey. The story ends with him being sentenced to reflective silence in the hallway of honest sleep. You move deeper into the wing and discover the dream genre shelves. Yes, they categorized them. Some of the main genres: flying without permission, floods with unclear meaning, talking objects giving unsolicited advice, misplaced items in familiar places, seeing someone you forgot to pay a debt to. There's even a recurring category called napping inside a dream about napping, which one clay critic described as tiresome but structurally ambitious. As you examine a shelf labeled Dreams Involving Public Embarrassment, Non-Ritual, something slips from between two tablets, a tiny, worn note etched on a sliver of baked clay. You pick it up and squint. "I dreamt of forgetting the sacred pig's name during a blessing ceremony. The pig did not forgive me. Poor guy." You lean back and think, it's odd how the Sumerians accepted dream logic with such unbothered confidence. They didn't rush to interpret everything. Sometimes they just documented it, nodded, and went on with their day. There's something soothing in that. Not everything needs to mean something. A dream can just be a dream. You're interrupted by a faint chime, silver this time, more delicate than the usual gong. A dream clerk, eyes half-lidded, glides by and replaces your clay with a fresh slab. A small label reads, "Round 2, in impeccable cuneiform." You decline politely. Enough dreams for one afternoon. You exit back through the hallway of sleepy statues, one of whom seems to wink in the fading light. Or maybe that's just the angle. The main hall hums softly. A group of students recites the story of Gilgamesh, not the dramatic parts, just the bit where he tries to stay awake for 7 days and fails. A useful cautionary tale in a culture that treated naps as civic virtue. You pass a sign. Tomorrow's Dream Reading Circle. Topic: What if fish ruled cities? Bring your own pillow. It's hard not to smile. Outside the dream documentation chamber, the air warms again. Someone offers you a sliver of dried melon. You accept. It's chewy, earthy, and oddly revitalizing. And just like that, you're back in the thick of it. Still inside the oldest nap-driven library system in the world. Still wandering. Still wondering what surprises lie ahead. But one thing's for sure, you'll never look at a nap, or a dream, the same way again. You meander out of the dream documentation wing, rubbing your temple as if your own clay-recorded dream still echoes there. The world feels hazier now, like you're inside the dream rather than remembering it. You find yourself in the courtyard again, but this time, your guide isn't the elbow-padded librarian. Instead, you're met by a broad-shouldered older man with eyebrows like date fronds and a voice like shifting gravel. He doesn't speak. He simply points upward. Above you stretches a pergola made from intricately carved cedar beams. Vines crawl over the woodwork, draped like lazy serpents. And just beyond it, another sign, hand-etched in pale lapis. Mandatory napping annex, third rotation. Ah. Rotation 3. That's you. You step under the pergola and feel the temperature drop. The shadows here are purposeful, curated. This annex isn't merely about resting, it's about resetting. The annex is unlike the other library wings. There are no shelves, no tablets, no styluses. Just dozens of stone benches, each cushioned with woven flax pads, some already occupied by draped, snoring readers. A fine mist, cool and slightly sweet, drifts from hidden reed ducts along the walls. Some enterprising Sumerian engineer, long ago, must have thought, what if fog, but on command. You ease down onto one of the benches, the flax yielding with a soft HFFFT. Instantly, your shoulders drop. The mat smells faintly of sesame and something musky, papyrus, maybe? A woman in ceremonial sandals walks past, gently plucking a lullaby on an instrument shaped like a turtle shell. The notes float like smoke. Then a bell rings, a single, low, unhurried note. This is the signal. Napping is now legally required. Yes, really. Historians still argue whether this part of the library schedule was enforced by civil law or internal policy. One camp insists napping was tied to temple offerings, another believes it was just early workplace wellness. What we know is this: if you refused to nap during your assigned rotation, you'd be handed a small clay slip with the Sumerian equivalent of "See me after rest." Your guide, the man with the barley-thick eyebrows, passes by again. This time, he drops a light linen cloth over your lap. Standard protocol. Every napper is to be covered modestly. Modesty, after all, promotes dream clarity, so says a dusty law code from the era of Enmetina. You glance at your surroundings, about 20 other dreamers around you, some already softly snoring, others staring into the distance with that glazed pre-nap look. One woman sits upright, clearly fighting it. A small librarian with a mallet-shaped hairstyle approaches her and gently pats her shoulder. No judgment, she murmurs, but if you could stop resisting, the nap gods would be grateful. The woman slumps forward almost instantly. You smile. And slowly let yourself recline. The bench is firm, but not unkind. The mist continues, cooling your skin, making the world feel wrapped in cotton. And just as your eyelids flutter closed, you realize something odd. No one speaks here. There are no lectures, no whispers, no rustling scrolls. Only breathing. And birds. Somewhere nearby, pigeons coo in hypnotic sync with the pulse of the wind chimes. Their rhythm, you suspect, was designed to mimic delta brain waves. Or maybe that's just the mist getting to you. You drift. In your semi-conscious days, the world rearranges itself. You dream you're cataloging clouds by texture. You're assigning scroll numbers to falling leaves. You're arguing politely with a clay pot about grammar. A crocodile in a librarian's robe insists that footnotes belong above the main text. It's wonderful nonsense. When you stir, the mist is gone. The bell rings again, 2 tones this time, slightly higher. Rotation complete. You sit up groggily. Everyone around you blinks in unison, like a field of waking flowers. No one rushes. No one checks a clock. There are no clocks. Only sunlight, now softened to a golden wash that filters through the cedar beams. And then, tea. A young apprentice appears with a tray of small terracotta cups filled with warm, fragrant tea, licorice root and thyme, maybe, with a faint hint of river mint. The post-nap tea ritual is sacred here. Each sip is meant to restore verbal function and slowly reintroduce your consciousness to grammar. You're offered a biscuit, fig and barley, dense enough to crack a tile, but surprisingly moist inside. You chew slowly. Someone nearby chuckles softly at their own half-remembered dream. Another hums a tune that might be older than bricks. There's a palpable calm now, as if the annex has wrung the stress from every shoulder and hidden it in the mist vents. And you think, what a society. The Sumerians, who invented taxes and bureaucracy and possibly even laundry lists, also carved out space for mandatory dozing. They didn't treat it as weakness, or laziness, or a luxury. They institutionalized it. Gave it architecture and rules and benches. Even punishments, apparently. A nearby mural shows a scene titled, "The Day Naps Were Ignored." It depicts a cranky-looking man chased by scroll-wielding scribes. His punishment? Forced to alphabetize the entire clay record of barley exports. With one hand. In sandals filled with pebbles. Let that be a warning. You finish your tea. Stand up slowly. You feel lighter now, dream-polished, as if your limbs are made of memory foam. Your guide appears again, nodding approvingly. Fourth rotation's beginning, he murmurs. But you're off cycle. You've earned access to the inner archives. He gestures toward a dark archway just past a garden of sleeping goats. Inner archives? That sounds promising. And possibly nap-adjacent. You follow. You walk slowly toward the shadowed archway, still loose-limbed and foggy-headed from your sanctioned nap, the tea settling like a friendly whisper in your stomach. Behind you, the misted benches of the nap annex fade into golden quiet, and ahead lies a tunnel so dim and narrow it seems unlikely to be part of any public-facing library. But this is Sumer, remember. Public spaces often disguise private knowledge. You pass beneath the arch. The stone is warm to the touch, etched with geometric spirals and cartouche-like stamps that appear to tell a story, something about a goddess and a dispute over a misplaced footstool, if your sleepy brain's translation is remotely accurate. The air cools quickly. It's damp now, slightly metallic. Your footsteps echo more sharply as you descend 3 shallow steps into what can only be described as a vault made for secrets. The inner archives. No signage. No announcements. Just rows of tightly spaced cubbyholes filled with sealed clay cylinders, stored vertically like sleepy wine bottles. Each is labeled with what looks like a code, a combination of cuneiform glyphs and tiny pictograms. A fish, a reed, a star. You peer closer. One cylinder bears the unmistakable image of a donkey wearing a crown. You reach for it instinctively. "Aha," says a soft voice beside you. "Reading privileges must be granted by the archivist." You turn. It's a woman, not much older than you, perhaps, dressed in a layered robe dyed the exact color of river silt. Her hair is braided into spirals and fixed with styluses instead of pins. Her tone is warm but absolute. You're not cleared for monarchic satire cylinders. You nod sheepishly. The donkey will have to wait. She gestures to a reading station, a low table, padded mat, a stylus set neatly rolled in flax cloth. The archivist selects a different cylinder, this one marked with what might be a loaf of bread and the symbol for silence. She breaks the seal with a tool shaped like a bird's beak and rolls the clay onto a reed-lined tray. It's a library schedule. Specifically, a napping compliance log from the reign of King Uarnamu. You're reading the equivalent of a time card, for sleep. Apparently, every registered reader in the public library system had a nap ledger. If you skipped more than 3 consecutive nap slots, your library privileges were temporarily revoked, unless you could produce a physician's token or a disturbed dream clause from a priest. Historians still argue whether these clauses were truly honored or just polite fiction. Some suggest librarians simply invented the rule to prevent political officials from hogging the benches. You scan the ledger. The handwriting is impeccable. Samasu, son of Ianiabzu, took full rest. Dreamed of a talking fish. Reinstated. And below that, Ninsutu, daughter of Lugolkae, skipped rest, cited, critical prayer work. Marked absent. Appeal denied. You try not to laugh. You fail. The archivist raises an eyebrow but says nothing. She unrolls a second cylinder. This one isn't a log but a fragment of internal correspondence, claymail, essentially, between two librarians debating a proposed change to nap mat materials. One advocated woven reeds for spinal uniformity, the other lobbied for soft goat fluff to reduce mid-dream back spasms. Eventually, goat fluff won. Probably for the best. You're now deep in a clay paper trail of institutional policies so detailed it would put any modern HR department to shame. There are memos on sanctioned nap time music, lyre-based only, no flutes, too stimulating, regulations on companion animals during rest, one per reader, no howlers, and a multi-tablet dissertation on the optimal temperature for lucid dreaming, 26.3 degrees Celsius, apparently, though some rogue scholars insisted on 27. And then there's the gold, a full chart of Sumerian nap classifications. According to one cylinder, all official naps were to be categorized on a 5-symbol scale, ranging from quick doze, QD, to spiritual drift, SD, to the coveted scholarly slumber, SS, which was said to be the only state in which the subconscious could accurately recall ancient language conjugations. You wonder what sort of nap you just had. Probably somewhere between QD and SD, with a hint of barley biscuit. As you read, the archivist occasionally swaps in a new cylinder, each one opening up another sliver of this bureaucratic dreamscape. There's even a sealed notice addressed to the Library Napping Oversight Council, warning of an outbreak of improper mid-rest murmurings that were distracting other sleepers. The suggested solution? Whisper training workshops. Mandatory attendance. You ask the archivist if such workshops ever took place. Every third moon, she says with a smirk. They were wildly ineffective. And here's the strangest part. You begin to notice subtle marks in the margins of the clay tablets, fingerprints pressed lightly into corners, probably by scribes or readers. Some look accidental. But others are deliberately placed, forming a kind of tactile commentary. A thumbprint beside a passage about mat inspections. A pinky swirl next to a log of non-compliant nappers. It's as if the Sumerians developed an early form of annotation, through touch. Modern scholars call it tactile tagging, though some argue these were just doodles. The debate rages on. The archivist notices your interest and whispers, "We call those the ghost scribes." Their opinions linger, even when the words fade. You look up. She gestures toward a corridor beyond the reading station. There's a final chamber, she says. It's for those who wish to leave something behind. Leave something? You rise, muscles still limber from the nap, and head toward the passage. The walls grow narrower, lit by faint lamps made from pressed bitumen and translucent stone. You enter a small, circular room. At the center, a blank clay tablet. Soft. Damp. Ready. Write your dream, the archivist says from behind you. Or your favorite nap. Or just a feeling. You take up a stylus. After a moment's hesitation, you press your fingers into the clay. Not a word. Just a shape, somewhere between a spiral and a question mark. The archivist nods once. It will stay here. Long after you've left. You smile. And as you exit the chamber, walking back into the warmth of the upper library halls, something in you feels heavier. Not burdensome. Just more grounded. Like you've joined a lineage of dreamers who believed that naps were sacred, policy could be poetic, and a well-placed biscuit could solve almost anything. The air in the upper library feels different now, lighter, drier, almost celebratory. Whether it's the memory of that soft clay or the subtle realization that you just contributed to a 10,000-year-old nap registry, something shifts in your step. You're not just a visitor anymore. You've left a smudge on the scroll of history. As you pass through the main atrium again, the mid-morning light has stretched further across the tiled floor, creating long, golden trapezoids that make you slow down, like you're walking through a sunbeam museum. You notice things now you hadn't earlier: a bronze incense dish shaped like a camel yawning, an unattended basket of plum pits, and a librarian gently scolding a goose for wandering into the archives. The goose, unbothered, honks twice and waddles out. You're drawn toward a circular stairwell, barely noticeable unless you were deliberately scanning the walls for curved geometry. A small sign reads, "Restricted, but not that restricted." Naturally, you descend. Each step is slightly concave, worn smooth by centuries of sandals and ceremonial slippers. The air cools again, but not ominously. It's the refreshing kind of subterranean chill that suggests you're about to discover something preserved. At the bottom, a doorway without a door, flanked by carved reeds and etched cuneiform symbols that you vaguely recognize as relating to memory and scent. You've entered the scented scrolls room. It is immediately, undeniably clear that this room smells amazing. Not in a perfumery overload way, but in the kind of gentle complexity that makes your brain go slightly still: fig leaves and old papyrus, cedar oil, faint honeyed myrrh, something citrusy and unexpected like citron peel. You inhale. The tension behind your eyes releases with a soft pop. Now, technically, this is a storage archive for sensory logs, scrolls and tablets infused with smells, meant to evoke specific experiences or ritual states. You find out later that the Sumerians believed scent was a mnemonic aid, that you couldn't truly remember a moment unless you remembered how it smelled. One scroll crackles softly as you unroll it. The top is labeled, "Feast of the First Barley Loaf, Uruk, Year of the Three Moons." The clay is thin, almost translucent. And though the text has faded, the embedded aroma is still vivid: fresh-baked grain, burnt butter, traces of river mud and fig. Another scroll smells of wet reeds, crushed thyme, and something hauntingly floral. It's labeled, "First Argument with Father-in-Law, Resolved with Wine." The Sumerians were nothing if not comprehensive. You sit down on a cushion that smells like sun-warmed wool and keep sniffing your way through the archive. Historians still argue whether these scent tablets were truly part of mainstream archival practice or more of an elite eccentricity. Some even claim they were narrative perfumes, meant to accompany oral storytelling performances in temple courtyards. Others suggest they were just elaborate ways to mask the smell of old scrolls and sweaty scribes. Whatever the case, it's delightful. And oddly relaxing. A particularly tiny scroll draws your attention. It's barely the size of your palm and sealed with a dab of blue wax. You crack it open. The scent hits instantly: damp straw, goat milk, and soap. The tag reads, "First solo nap as apprentice scribe. Overslept. Woke to crusty beard." You chuckle out loud. So much for noble history. The Sumerians were nap rebels, too. This room has a quiet joy to it, almost playful. You realize you're surrounded by centuries of sleep and memory, and not just the abstract kind. The felt kind. The smells people breathed in before dozing off beside their ink pots. The perfume of temple lanterns burning low. The scent of clean mats on inspection day. Of herbal tea infused with anise, mint, and one illegal drop of imported cinnamon. There's even a scent diary in the back corner, a large wax tablet embedded with 28 shallow scoops, each holding a hardened lump of scented resin. The entries are labeled only by moon phase and personal emotion. New moon, slightly proud, mostly sleepy. Waxing half, confused but federal. Full, Miss Mother. Not the soup. Waning, reread archive rules. Fell asleep anyway. You realize this wasn't a public library in the way modern cities think of it. It was a sanctuary of the senses. A sleep-tuned, bureaucracy-baked, joyfully over-regulated spa of the mind. And then, your foot grazes something metal under a cushion. It's a bell. Or half of one. Attached to the fragment is a small slip of dried palm paper, the ink almost faded. But you squint and sound it out. Alarm bell, emergency wake only, do not ring except in extreme wakefulness. Apparently, even in the depths of a nap-optimized library, someone feared the worst, an outbreak of alertness. You pocket the bell fragment. The scent scrolls have you drowsy now, head tilting, eyelids lazy. It's the scent of ancient sleep itself. You lean back against the cushion and wonder what your own nap log might say. Visitor from far land. Read everything. Dreamed of goat with crown. Outside, faint bells chime the midday hour. The sound doesn't disturb you, it punctuates your rest, like a comma in a very old sentence. And as you drift off, curled among the dream scribes and their aromatic legacy, you feel it again, that strange sense of being held by something older, softer, and infinitely patient. The Sumerians believed sleep was a sacred passage. That within the resting body, the spirit moved backward through time, greeting ancestors and unlived futures alike. You don't need to believe it. But in this room, scented with soot and barley, you might just feel it. You wake up, if it can even be called that, without really moving. More like your awareness drifts back into your body, like a little paper boat floating back to the riverbank. The scented scrolls room remains dim and drowsy, with no change in lighting or sound, as if time politely waited for you to finish napping. You stretch, carefully, so as not to knock over any historically significant fragrances, and decide to rejoin the waking world. But as you climb the circular stairs, you pause at a fork you hadn't noticed earlier. A narrow hallway curves to the left, where a painted tile depicts a crescent moon reclining in a bed of papyrus. You head that way. Of course you do. The passage opens into a curious little chamber called the Record of Failed Naps. That's its actual title, etched neatly above the lintel in comically large cuneiform. Inside, low benches line the walls, and a strange energy hums through the space, mild frustration mixed with institutional resignation. You've just entered the Sumerian complaint department for sleep gone wrong. On one wall, a clay bulletin board displays sleep failure reports spanning centuries. They're structured like bureaucratic poetry: name, date, intended duration, actual duration, interruption cause, mood upon waking. In Lil's Apprentice. 4th month of moonfish. Planned, 3 hours. Actual, 11 minutes. Cause, goose stepped on face. Mood, bitter. You begin to laugh quietly and can't stop. This is where scribes, priests, and even visitors documented their nap-related grievances, mostly to get it off their chests, but partly for record-keeping. The Sumerians believed no institution was complete without a paper trail, especially for something as sacred and fragile as institutional sleep. One entry involves a runaway incense burner that spat embers upon sleeping clerk. Another references a low-flying messenger drone, really just a cranky boy with a wax tablet, whose voice cracked at such an unfortunate pitch that 3 scribes jolted awake mid-dream. Historians still argue whether this chamber was an actual record-keeping facility or more of a passive-aggressive cultural joke. The layout resembles certain council satire rooms found in other Mesopotamian cities, public spaces designed to air grievances under the guise of archival formality. Sort of an ancient Sumerian version of a suggestion box mixed with stand-up comedy. There's even a small stage, or platform, at the far end. Upon closer inspection, you see it's labeled Designated Lament Area. Beneath it, a row of flat tablets offers sleep-related poetry from across the ages. Some are tragic, some oddly romantic. Shared mat, midsummer. Dreamt we traded names. Woke to scent of ink and you gone. And another. I made a pillow of my arms. But they betrayed me. Pins and needles until dawn. One tablet just reads, one mosquito. 1. Ruined everything. You sit down on a bench, letting the ancient frustrations wash over you. There's something deeply comforting about this communal airing of failed slumbers. You felt it yourself. Those nights when your brain decides to recite grocery lists or suddenly demand a moral reckoning at 2 a.m. The Sumerians had those nights too, only their grocery lists included things like saffron, 1 goat, incantation tablet. In a corner, a librarian has nodded off while sitting bolt upright. A tablet rests on their lap, a stylus still loosely held in one hand. You can't help but peek. The tablet reads, "Tried guarding the complaint chamber again. Failed. Dreamt I was a goose." You smile and leave a tiny wax pebble beside them, a sign of respect, apparently, in this library's etiquette system. A tiny thing, but meaningful. Past this room is another hallway, this one narrower, with walls lined in linen and small faded frescoes. You trace your fingers along one, a series of people sleeping in odd positions, one curled like a cat under a cart, another hanging halfway off a bed made of hay bales. And there, a larger figure reclining in regal stillness. At first you assume it's a high priest or official. But no, based on the text, this is the official nap inspector. You pause. In ancient Sumerian libraries, nap quality was such a matter of civic pride that once a year, during the festival of cooling winds, an inspector would go around and assess the posture, duration, and atmosphere of public napping zones. Prizes were awarded. Areas of improvement were noted. One line reads, "South Archive mat too scratchy. North Zone goose free, excellent. Rooftop siesta area, windy but majestic." The inspector was not a punishing figure, but a gentle advisor. Think less sleep police, more nap concierge. Historians still argue about the identity of the most famous inspector, whether she was actually a priestess or perhaps just a very persuasive mapmaker who lobbied herself into bureaucratic myth. But regardless, the tradition stuck. You now feel a subtle shift in perspective. This wasn't just a sleepy place that tolerated rest. It was an entire institution architected around the rhythms of human slowness. Knowledge and rest were partners, not rivals. You didn't earn your nap, you required it to understand. You imagine the inspector pausing by your resting place earlier, noting your curled posture, the scroll tucked under your chin, the faint smile on your sleeping face. Dreamer from elsewhere. No goose disturbance. Scented scroll exposure positive. Grade A. That mental gold star keeps you company as you shuffle toward the next corridor, your sandals whispering across time-smoothed stone. Because in this library, even your failure to sleep is part of the record. You follow a gently curving hallway lined with oil lamps set low into the walls, each flame trembling like it's caught in a dream. The path leads you past another scent-coated curtain. This one smells faintly of barley, linen, and, was that warm goat's milk? Comforting, if oddly specific. Pushing through, you step into what feels like an entirely different world, the nap tools room. It's as if the Sumerians had cracked open your modern sleep routine, pillows, weighted blankets, blackout curtains, and responded with a dusty shrug that said, "We invented all that, sort of." The room is softly lit, the walls covered in woven panels to mute sound. A bench of display items stretches before you, and immediately you're drawn to a peculiar-looking rectangle stuffed with what appears to be finely shaved reeds and stitched inside a goat hide casing. A sign reads, "Prototype pillow, circa 2400 BCE. Moderate neck support. Mildly judgmental." You sit on it for half a second. Nope, definitely still feels like someone folded a fence. Next to it, stone headrests. Like, literal blocks of carved alabaster with a small indentation for your skull. You try to imagine falling asleep on one and conclude that either ancient necks were made of granite, or this was a form of polite punishment. Historians still argue whether these headrests were purely ceremonial or whether they doubled as dream positioning devices. Some believe they were designed to preserve elaborate hairstyles, others suspect they were attempts at dream clarity through elevation. One fringe theory posits they were created by a particularly vengeful chiropractor. Further along the bench is a display of weighted sleep mat covers, layers of tightly woven flax fibers bound with copper thread trim. They're surprisingly elegant, if a bit itchy. You run your fingers over them and feel the weight immediately. Not unlike those trendy modern gravity blankets, except these probably came with instructions written in cuneiform and warnings like, "Do not use near ritual fire." And then, tucked into a shadowy niche, the piece de resistance, the Sumerian sleep hood. It's essentially a soft, linen headwrap lined with crushed mint leaves and poppy oil. The hood is tied loosely under the chin and trails down the back in what looks suspiciously like a ceremonial mullet. Based on the accompanying plaque, this particular hood once belonged to a temple librarian who claimed it helped her dream without drifting too far. Take that as you will. You can't resist. You lift a replica from a shelf and ease it over your head. Everything immediately smells like ancient toothpaste and old poetry. The hood muffles the ambient sounds and presses gently against your temples. You lie back on one of the demonstration mats and immediately sink into that delicious, almost nap, zone where your thoughts swim like lazy fish and your limbs forget how to do anything but exist. There's a soft creaking nearby, followed by the whisper of footsteps. A librarian in full napping regalia, flowing robes, padded sandals, a stylus tucked behind one ear, walks by, pausing briefly to adjust your hood. They nod once, approvingly, and vanish. It's unclear whether this was real or dream hallucinated. Honestly, does it matter? You stay there for a while, watching the gentle flicker of lamp shadows dance across the ceiling. As you start to drift, a voice, possibly from the walls themselves, recites a lullaby fragment in Old Akkadian. Something about stars, reeds, and wool. It sounds like the kind of song meant for shepherds and philosophers alike. Eventually, you sit up, slowly, because your brain is soup and your spine is still adjusting to the idea of existing in gravity again. To one side of the room is a curious little desk labeled, Nap Metrics Recorder. On it, a stylus, a wax tablet, and several empty forms. You fill one out, as is tradition. Name, Dreamer Visitor. Nap quality, medium fluffy. Dream contents, uncertain but included a goat in a library. Mood upon waking, agreeably confused. You drop it in the offering basket labeled, For Future Archives. As you walk toward the exit, you pass one final display, a scroll sealed in wax. It's titled, Treatise on the Four Nap Winds. Scholars think it's part metaphor, part meteorological joke. The four winds, according to this document, dictate nap success. North wind, best for midday snoozes, especially post-ritual snacking. East wind, distracting, carries gossip and market noise. South wind, dream-inducing, but risky, may lead to forgetting names or time of day. West wind, unpredictable. Could bring peaceful sleep, or bees. Historians still argue if this was a satirical piece written by bored junior scribes or an actual nap manual with layered symbolism. Regardless, the Sumerians took their sleep, especially communal, library-sanctioned sleep, very seriously. You exit the nap tools room feeling oddly validated. They didn't just nap. They engineered it. Optimized it. Cataloged and debated it. And now, wrapped in the faint scent of mint and linen, with the pressure of a poppy oil hood still ghosting your brow, you feel like you're walking through honey. The next chamber beckons, lit in that warm orange twilight that seems to glow from inside the stone itself. The dream continues, you shuffle onward, senses still slightly fogged from the sleephood experience, when the corridor opens into a sprawling circular chamber, the library nap registry hall. This room is a marvel of both bureaucracy and comfort, two things that rarely go together, unless you're Sumerian. Here, meticulous record-keeping meets pillow-stuffed benches and surprisingly ergonomic clay seating. Picture a DMV staffed by monks who just want you to relax. The walls curve upward, forming a dome painted in faded cobalt and copper hues, decorated with stenciled symbols of sheep, stars, and stylized closed eyes. It gives the impression that the very ceiling is watching over your rest, but in a deeply chill, cosmic uncle kind of way. At the center stands a circular desk ringed with wax tablets, delicate reed pens, and bowls of damp clay for thumbprinting. This is where naps are logged, categorized, and, yes, evaluated. You approach the registry and glance at a clay slab freshly imprinted with neat cuneiform. Apel Nanerta, scribe in training. Nap began at 3rd hour post-moonset. Duration, 42 minutes. Position, right side, curled. Dream themes, boats, sorrow, lentils. Post-nap mood, willing to resume taxonomy work. Slightly gassy. Another record boasts, Namter's 3rd nap of the day. Unauthorized. Librarian reprimanded. Bread privileges revoked. Oof. Historians still argue whether these records were merely ceremonial, used for calendar rituals, or part of an actual wellness program. One camp insists these entries helped manage work-life balance in temple libraries. Another claims they were an early form of dream analysis. A fringe theory, likely promoted by overly romantic archaeologists, suggests certain dreams were believed to predict the price of barley. Regardless, the sheer volume of these tablets is overwhelming. Entire shelves stretch across the walls, sorted by decade, profession, nap posture, and even the ambient noise level during sleep. One category reads, noisy naps, drumming nearby. Another, rain-enhanced sleep, library roof leak unfixed. You take a seat beside a scribe dressed in soft blue robes. She dips her stylus into a dish of ink made from crushed walnuts and soot and casually asks, "Would you like to log your rest?" Before you can answer, she's already handing you a form. You dictate slowly. Nap start, indeterminate. Duration, felt like bread rising. Dream imagery, floating goats and a nap evaluator in a hat made of reeds. Waking emotion, giggly confusion, slight neck cramp. She nods approvingly, stamps the clay with a lotus symbol, and slides it into a warm slot for drying. A nearby tablet reads, all nap records reviewed monthly by the Senior Dream Council. You blink. There's a Dream Council? Apparently yes. Somewhere within the deeper chambers of this library lurks a group of elder librarians, gray-haired, slipper-wearing sages, whose job it is to review nap logs and extract insights for the temple. Their decisions are final, their faces rarely seen, and their favorite snack, allegedly, is sesame flatbread dipped in fermented date syrup. Not relevant, but a nice touch. As you stand to leave, you notice one more wall, titled, Controversial Nap Logs. The tablets here are cracked and scorched, the writing half erased. One entry, only partially readable, hints at a nap that lasted 7 hours and resulted in unusual clarity regarding the placement of ziggurats. Another appears to describe a dream so vivid it caused its recorder to retire and become a potter. Historians still argue whether these were just tall tales etched for entertainment, or whether the Sumerians believed certain dreams granted dangerous insight. A few scholars whisper that entire architectural decisions may have come from a particularly good sleep. And then there's the plaque mounted above all of it, he who naps well, scribes well. He who naps unwisely, drops stylus in inkpot. You can't argue with that. Your last stop in the nap registry hall is a small alcove called the Failed Nap Archive. It's kind of like a historical complaint box. Tablets here record nap attempts gone wrong. Most of them are hilarious. Interrupted by goat. Realized I forgot to extinguish ceremonial incense. Could not sleep due to scribe in next caught mumbling names of city gates. Felt judged by nearby statue. And your personal favorite, attempted nap during thunderstorm. Mistook thunder for divine scolding. Remained awake out of guilt. There's a strange comfort in knowing even the most devout nap enthusiast sometimes struck out. You pass back into the hallway, where a faint lavender scent floats from somewhere unseen. The air is thick with drowsy energy, like everyone here just got up from a nap or is about to return to one. You trail your hand along the stone wall, still warm from ancient sun. Just ahead, a sign etched directly into the stone. It reads, "Dreams proceed this way." The corridor narrows again, but the light ahead is golden and inviting, the air whispering of parchment, beeswax, and something older than language. You move forward. The corridor bends gently, walls now lined with painted murals, quiet, unflashy illustrations of Sumerians doing what they did best, organizing. Farmers label baskets. Merchants tally grain. Scribes scribble. And in nearly every scene, someone naps discreetly nearby. Under a fig tree. Against a wall. On a reed mat halfway through a bureaucratic epiphany. You arrive at what appears to be a transition zone between the library's nap precincts and the actual archive stacks. It's called, with impeccable literalness, the pre-dreaming orientation vestibule. This room is small but lush, with woven rush mats, copper bowls filled with sleep-inducing oils, and a reed-framed poster reading. Prepare the mind for order. Quiet the gut. Hide the stylus. Do not drool on the tablets. The purpose of this room? To gently separate thought from duty. Because you're about to enter the deep archives, the hallowed space where scholars dreamed ideas into reality and, occasionally, drooled into history. A young priestess appears at your side. Her robe is dyed with crushed indigo and stitched in the pattern of a star chart. She offers you a peculiar item, a dream mask, made of softened linen and painted with closed eyes. You slip it on. A soft jangle of bronze bell sounds, not unlike wind chimes made of goat anklets. The scent of date palm resin curls under your nose. You are led, slowly, into the deep archives. Here, the floor is not stone but compacted loam, springy underfoot. The temperature is cooler, the light dimmer. Each row of shelves is built of dark wood and clay, packed with scrolls, reed bundles, and wax-sealed jars. But strangest of all, nearly every third shelf has a built-in nap nook. Some with cushions. Others with faded blankets. One even has a gentle spring bubbling in a little stone basin, likely for toe dipping, though no official record confirms this. According to the lone surviving inscription on a support beam, he who seeks truth must pause often. Dreams carry the missing glyph. Historians still argue whether this was poetic license or an actual library protocol. One camp believes naps were encouraged as mnemonic devices, a way to reinforce learning. Another believes the nap was the point itself, and reading was merely a ritual of arrival. You spot several cubbies labeled with users' names. Scribes, priests, merchant scholars. There's even one corner space tagged, Dog, Temple of Enki. Whether a librarian's pet or the temple's official nap mascot, nobody knows. In one corner of the archive, you encounter a particularly thick cluster of nap zones, marked, disputed scrolls. Apparently, scholars were required to nap before and after engaging with certain controversial texts. As if a dream might reveal whether an idea was true, false, or just poorly copied from a Babylonian neighbor. Some of these disputed works include an annotated map of the underworld, with shortcuts. List of kings who may or may not have been real. Predicted lunar events through the year 8000, adjusted for mood swings. 7 different ways to count a cow. Each scroll came with a clay tablet that read, rest, then read. If still confused, rest again. A few were labeled, do not read while sleep deprived. One was simply stamped with a sleepy-eyed fish and the word, maybe later. A scribe nearby is sprawled across a mat, snoring lightly, a half-read scroll beside him. You lean over to glimpse the title, on the ideal ratio of nap to work. Classic. You curl into one of the empty nap alcoves. The air is cool, the clay shelf still warm from candle heat. The scroll you hold smells of beeswax, old ink, and ambition. You close your eyes briefly, just to rest them. And suddenly you're dreaming in cuneiform. Symbols float before you, water jugs, sheep, crescent moons, 2 oddly flirtatious ducks. You feel the texture of history soften beneath you, details shifting gently like sand dunes. A voice, old, slow, bemused, drifts through the dream. Knowledge is the sleep between sentences. Rest, and your mind shall alphabet itself. You wake with a start. 10 minutes? An hour? No one seems to mind. In fact, the scribe from earlier gives you a thumbs up, then goes right back to snoring. Near the exit, a clay tile reads, "Dreaming is not laziness. It is the second draft of thought." This may be the oldest endorsement of napping as an intellectual tool on record. You rise, stretch, and follow a pathway deeper into the stack-filled heart of the library, where records grow older and more peculiar. A corridor opens to the left, marked the Inksleep Incident Memorial Alcove. Intrigued, you step in. It turns out, many years ago, a librarian known as Thomas accidentally fell asleep mid-copying a critical tax tablet and rolled onto the fresh ink. The resulting blot became famous. It vaguely resembled the city of Ur, and was mistaken for a divine omen. Pilgrims came. Offerings were left. A shrine was built around the inkblot slab. Years later, the truth emerged. Now, the slab sits behind a curtain, adorned with a single caption, "Sleep before you scribe." You pause, take one last look at the ink slab, and step back into the archive maze. More stories await. You meander deeper into the labyrinth of clay and quiet, where every turn feels more ancient than the last. The air changes slightly, cooler, denser, as though the knowledge stored here thickens the atmosphere. You pass another shelf stacked neatly with bundled tablets, each carefully stamped and strung with simple reed cord. The section placard carved above reads, "Unverified Observations, Weather and Dreams." Just beyond it is the section devoted to the Sumerians' most curious library policy of all, the nap licensing chamber. Yes, that's correct. To nap regularly in this public institution, you needed a permit. Or at the very least, a nap token. And before you laugh, because it's hard not to, a carved sign on the archway ahead seems to anticipate your amusement. It reads, "He who naps without cause dreams poorly. Seek the license of leisure." Inside, the room is compact but elegant. Clay stools sit arranged in a semicircle around a central podium. Small windows filter dusty beams of light onto a clay desk, behind which sits a statue of a serene-faced elder in mid-yawn. Supposedly, he was the first head of dreaming services, although scholars disagree whether he ever actually existed or if he was invented as a joke that got wildly out of hand. You examine the wall where dozens of clay nap tokens hang, each bearing a different symbol: a stretched cat, a sleeping ibis, a loaf of bread with closed eyes, a pot tipped over and snoring. Applicants were expected to choose the symbol that matched their energy. Too twitchy? You'd be recommended a short, pre-nap meditation, possibly involving cucumbers and chanting. Already sleepy? Straight through to the mats. Scribes would evaluate your nap readiness by checking 3 key factors. Pulse of the left wrist, measured against a bronze water timer. State of your eyebrows, were they relaxed or aggressively tense? Sound of your breath, was it more flute or panicked goat? Pass all 3, and you'd be handed a token valid for 30 minutes of uninterrupted sleep, extendable if you were deemed to be processing knowledge at the dream level. Now, you may wonder, was anyone ever denied a nap? Records suggest yes. A clay log fragment found in a storage pit tells of a rather intense scholar who attempted to nap 5 times in one day while loudly quoting agricultural statistics in his sleep. He was politely banned for a week and instructed to nap only in dream-neutral zones. Others faked nap eligibility to sneak out of scroll copying duties. There were rumors of counterfeit nap tokens circulating among students, some crudely carved from bread dough and painted with soot. These were eventually sniffed out by the library dogs, trained to detect edible forgeries. One especially tired priest was caught trying to bribe a librarian with figs to extend his nap allotment. His punishment? 10 hours of uninterrupted sitting through a lecture on different ways to count barley sacks. You spot an old instructional tablet perched beside the podium. It reads, "One cannot nap where minds are loud. Be still. Breathe like you have time. Let the ink settle in your veins." A surprisingly poetic take, for what was effectively a queue management system. In the corner sits a reclining bench, much fancier than the others. A little plaque says, "Reserved for dream-based resolutions." Apparently, this was for visitors trying to solve intellectual dilemmas through guided napping. If your dream revealed a solution, you were expected to return and inscribe it in the communal dream ledger. You flip through a few entries. They range from genuinely insightful. "Dream the dam should curve, not angle. We'll test at dawn." To the clearly abstract. Purple Lizard said taxes are made of bread. Unsure what this means. We'll renap. And one that simply reads, "Slept. No dream. Just peace. Still worth it." There's something humbling about it all. A society that prized thinking so deeply they built time for unthinking. That saw sleep not as a break from duty, but as part of the duty itself. Modern debates rage about productivity, rest, and burnout. But here, thousands of years ago, Sumerians were already licensing their naps with bureaucratic grace, and defending them with clay tablets. Historians still argue whether this policy was limited to scholars, or if everyday citizens could apply for a nap license too. One camp believes nap access was tied to civic role, scribes, temple workers, and priests receiving priority. Another insists it was egalitarian, with tokens issued based on nothing more than yawn frequency. A third, far less respected school of thought claims the whole system was satirical, an early form of Sumerian performance art. But their arguments fall apart when you examine the administrative depth of it all: dream ledgers, clay punch cards, renewal slips. You're handed a replica nap token by a librarian who appears out of nowhere, silently, like all good nap enablers. She smiles faintly, gestures toward the hallway ahead, and vanishes. You tuck the token into your sash and follow the torch-lit path into a wing simply labeled, "Sound Regulation Room." Your footsteps echo softly as you pass through, and you notice the air has grown strangely silent. Like a room designed to hush thoughts before they've fully formed. The walls here are padded with bundles of dried reeds, tightly packed like ancient acoustic foam. Chimes hang from the ceiling, not to ring, but to absorb vibration. Even your breathing feels muffled. There, at the far end, rests the quiet gong. Not for striking. For staring at. Supposedly, if you gazed long enough at its stillness, your own thoughts would match it. Monks and dreamers would sit here for hours, letting their inner noise fade. It's oddly effective. Your mind grows slower. Softer. And the next step forward feels like falling into a soft pool of calm. You exit quietly. Not because you must, but because it now feels right. You glide forward with the hush of the quiet gong still humming in the back of your mind. It's as if your thoughts have unspooled into the corridors themselves, blending with the ancient air. The path now leads into a lower chamber, subtly cooler, where a hand-painted tablet on the wall simply reads, "Restoration and Reshelving." This, it turns out, is where lost knowledge went to nap. The room is long and drowsy, its clay floors grooved from centuries of careful footsteps. Rows of wide, shallow drawers line the walls, some open to reveal broken or partially erased tablets, others locked tight with twine and stamped in wax. Overhead, copper oil lamps burn with a dim, steady flicker that makes the shadows yawn. And you can't help but chuckle at the large stone sign at the entrance, which says, in blocky Sumerian script, "Do not wake the misfiled texts. A fair warning." According to one dreamy legend, there once was a tax record tablet so cranky from being stored upside down that when a priest tried to rewrite it, every reed stylus in the room snapped in half. Was it clumsy coincidence, or grumpy script magic? Historians still argue whether that tale was cautionary fiction or archival truth. Here, behind low benches, librarians practice the art of tabletum shimtu, the delicate, nearly meditative act of reshelving with intention. It wasn't enough to place a tablet in its correct physical location. You had to reshelve it emotionally, too. If a text on crop failures had been read during a drought, it might need time in the Soothing Histories alcove before returning to the agricultural records shelf. Balance, after all, was everything. One surviving manual reads, "A tablet speaks in clay and silence. If its silence is uneasy, do not rush its return." Yes. Even ancient filing systems were dramatic. Each scribe had a personal set of styluses and a reshelving kit that included a soft reed brush for dusting off residue from sticky-fingered readers, a sliver of obsidian for gently scraping away stray markings left by overconfident students, a thin cushion of pressed goat wool to rest fragile pieces upon, a vial of date syrup, used occasionally as an offering to wake the word sweetly. You pause at a reshelving altar still intact. A tiny stone basin, flecked with dried resin, likely once held aromatic oil. A flicker of scent still lingers, burnt cinnamon and river clay. The kind of smell that clings to old thoughts. A pile of sleeping tablets lies nearby. These are the unread texts, awaiting their first set of eyes since being unearthed decades ago. Many remain untranslated, but their topics are often hinted at by marginal doodles, tiny carvings of goats in dance poses, what may be a recipe for lentil beer, or in one case, a crude diagram of someone sneezing near a statue. You imagine what a full day in this room must have felt like: the soft scrape of stylus, the clink of drawer handles, the gentle debate of overeager apprentices whispering about whether they should categorize a storm log as weather or omens. And, of course, the naps. Because even here, amid ink and filing, sleep was interwoven into the rhythm. Many restoration tables had drawers beneath them, pull-out mats, really, where librarians could stretch out for 5 minutes when the cuneiform lines began to blur. They called it blinking sleep, a term still found scribbled in the margins of maintenance logs. One such note reads, "Blink slept after over-reshelving the barley tables. Dreamed the numbers were arguing. Reshelved again, better this time." Some scholars today believe that this blink sleeping contributed directly to the resilience of Sumerian library systems. It wasn't about efficiency, it was about clarity. Tired minds made sloppy archivists, and the stakes were high. One misplaced tax tablet could spark a temple dispute. One misfiled dream omen. You might accidentally summon rain instead of quiet. You reach a glassy alcove at the far end. Inside rests a ceremonial shelving stylus, its tip fused from overuse, and its handle carved with sleepy eyes. A label reads, "For when the last word fits snug into its resting place." You take a moment to sit. The quiet here is less eerie than before, it's comforting, like a blanket of dust that's agreed not to settle too fast. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm of centuries. Somewhere behind you, a wax seal softens with the heat and drops open a drawer. Out tumbles a single clay tablet, perfectly preserved. On it, a short poem. "I read the stars. Then forgot what they meant. The answer came anyway. While I slept." You smile. Even the texts understood nap logic. Then, somewhere overhead, a subtle shift in the oil lamp signals the changing of hour. In ancient times, this would mean the beginning of the reshelving chant, a slow, hummed melody used to bring focus, and maybe lull the misfiled scrolls back to sleep. You hum something similar under your breath. The room seems to respond. And as you rise, ready to step into the next chamber, you wonder how many thoughts were born here not from reading, but from letting the mind float freely in the silent spaces between words. After all, the Sumerians didn't just catalog knowledge. They curated its rest. You leave behind the gentle hush of the reshelving alcove and step into a chamber that feels oddly formal, like a courtroom, but without the arguing. This is the Records Tribunal Room, a space where disputed texts were brought for interpretation, and where the librarians wore their most serious expressions, at least until the naps kicked in. This room was the intellectual heart of the Sumerian library, where clay met conflict, and interpretation met imagination. Think of it like an ancient editorial board, except every editor also had their own favorite god, personal reed stylus, and occasional dream about talking sheep. 2 long stone benches frame the room, polished smooth by centuries of careful sitting. Above them, murals depict the goddess Nisaba whispering into the ears of scribes as they dream. No surprise there, Nisaba was the patron of writing and accounting, and according to some temple texts, also of well-timed slumber. Here's how it worked. When 2 scribes found conflicting information on 2 tablets, say, different flood levels recorded for the same season, the matter would be brought to the tribunal. Not in haste, though. The tradition was to wait until both scribes had slept on the issue, literally. Debate without dreams? Absolutely not. Some tablets show stylized time logs. Scribe Dangula slept 3 hours, dreamed of fish. Scribe Namtar slept twice, woke once with clarity. Only then would they convene. And they wouldn't speak at first. Instead, each scribe would read aloud their version in a slow monotone while the others listened in stillness, much like today's ASMR videos, though perhaps with more nose whistling from elderly priests. Then came the dream defense. Yes, you heard that right. A scribe could bolster their interpretation with evidence from their sleep. In my dream, the barley swam, one might say, arguing for flood. Another might counter, I slept atop dry reeds and awoke with no dew, surely it was drought. It sounds absurd, but it worked. The Sumerians deeply respected the thin veil between waking logic and sleep-born insight. Historians still debate whether this dream logic tribunal was symbolic or if verdicts actually influenced city planning and taxes. The truth is probably somewhere in between. What we do know, final decisions were etched into consensus tablets and stored in a special wall recess, nicknamed by modern archaeologists as the Dream Shelf. Naturally, there was a nap chamber adjoining the tribunal. A small doorway led to the pillow room, where members could rest before or after major cases. The pillows, by the way, weren't soft. They were firm bricks wrapped in woven reeds, apparently just uncomfortable enough to encourage clarity without complete dozing off. You were expected to meditate, not snore. Of course, some couldn't resist. A recovered clay carving shows a tribunal scene with one judge mid-snooze, his reed stylus poking up like a miniature antenna. The other scribes seem unfazed. A faint inscription reads, "We let him nap." He dreamed of accurate taxes. The tribunal also heard disputes between temples, merchants, and even astrologers. One documented case involved a disagreement over whether a particular comet sighting meant the grain harvest should begin early. Each side presented its evidence, scrolls, sketches, sleep transcripts, and then retired to the pillow room. The resulting verdict? Begin harvest late. The stars are sleepy, not ready. Modern scholars can't agree if that was metaphor or meteorology. In this room, language wasn't fixed, it stretched and sighed and sometimes curled up for a rest. The tribunal's job wasn't to find absolute truth. It was to find a version of truth that felt restful, harmonious, and sustainable to live with. No wonder they built in pauses. Even the floor tiles in the tribunal chamber were laid in a calming spiral pattern. One ancient tablet claims that walking the spiral slowly, counterclockwise, before a dispute, invites the gods to soften your tongue. You give it a try. The spiral walk does seem to quiet the brain. Or maybe it's just that all this history, with its sleepy rituals and stylus whispers, is finally soaking into your bones. On the walls, you spot more inscriptions, like sleepy little reminders. Don't rush the tablet. Let the silence decide. Clay speaks only when the hands are rested. Your dreams are older than your arguments. You feel a surprising kinship with the long-gone scribes. They weren't just bureaucrats. They were dreamers with deadlines, archivists who trusted that sleep could be a tool of discernment. And in their world, a nap wasn't a delay, it was part of the process. Before leaving, you pause at the dream shelf. The consensus tablets here are worn but legible. One reads, "In the year of the quiet flood, we judged the storm not by noise, but by the whisper that followed." You exhale. That whisper still seems to echo faintly in the room. You shuffle onward, the hush of the tribunal still lingering in your ears like the last hum of a lullaby. The corridor narrows now, almost as if the library is guiding you gently inward, toward the quietest heart of the place. And there, nestled between clay walls carved with sleepy spirals, you find what might be the coziest surprise yet, the designated dream catalog room. At first glance, it looks like a small archive chamber. Low stone shelves line the walls, stacked not with traditional cuneiform tablets of trade or law, but with curiously rounded, palm-sized clay discs. You pick one up. It's etched with short phrases, oddly poetic, often repetitive, like a mantra for the tired mind. This was the library's dream archive. Not just the myths and legends inspired by dreams, but actual dreams recorded by scribes, priests, travelers, even children. Some are just a few words long. "A goat flew past the moon. My wife baked the sun." Others are longer, rambling accounts filled with rich, symbolic language. You imagine the ancient Sumerian equivalent of a bedtime forum, people waking and rushing to the library to immortalize their sleepy visions on clay. Why did they do it? Part ritual, part therapy, part epistemology. The Sumerians believed that dreams were divine messages, scattered like petals across the unconscious. And so, they built a dedicated space to record and analyze them, not in temples, but here, in the public library. A democratic dream bank, if you will. Historians still argue whether this catalog had an interpretive function, like a proto-psychology wing, or whether it was more of a spiritual scrapbook. Some tablets are marked with official-looking seals, others are more like graffiti. One popular tablet is re-recorded in multiple versions. It reads, "I walked on reeds. The reeds turned into snakes. The snakes sang a hymn. I forgot the hymn, but I felt calm." Strangely soothing, isn't it? And yes, there were interpreters, official roles, like dream decoders. These weren't fortune tellers exactly, more like sleepy logic analysts. They'd reference symbols from earlier dreams, compare tone and mood, and sometimes assign a ruling, harvest omen, marriage sign, library echo. A few of these interpreters became minor celebrities in their time. The most famous was a woman named Itura, known for dreaming of an eclipse 2 weeks before it occurred. Her tablet entry, "The sky blinked, then sighed," became one of the most copied lines in Sumerian dream literature. You see it etched in multiple styles across the room, like a favorite quote that never quite goes out of fashion. Naturally, nap cushions are built into the corners of this chamber. Some were filled with soft reeds, others with fine sand. One ancient cleaning record warns, "Do not overdream on weekdays. Let tablets cool between visions." That's right, dreaming too much was seen as a fire hazard. Not literally, of course, but mentally. Too many divine downloads could overheat the soul. So they built in cool-down rituals. On one wall, a tiny set of clay bells still hangs. Their purpose? After waking, a scribe would ring a specific pattern to signal their dream was ready to be inscribed. Each bell had a tone linked to one of the 7 sacred symbols: moon, sun, water, fire, reed, ox, and sandal. That last one might seem odd, but remember, sandals walked across dreams too. And there's more. You notice a small door at the back of the dream catalog room, leading to an even quieter nook, the reconciliation alcove. This space wasn't for writing or recording. It was just for sitting. Existing. Letting the dream settle. You lower yourself onto a cushioned bench worn into the stone itself. The walls curve gently inward, creating a sound pocket where your breathing slows and echoes softly back to you. Some call it the first ever sleep pod. Above you, a single line of text curves around the ceiling. To rest is to listen in both directions, future and past. It's almost too relaxing. You imagine Sumerian teens sneaking in here to nap away their chores. One clay prank inscription left behind reads, "I dreamed of no taxes. I awoke still dreaming. Please tell the king." It's easy to picture the quiet giggles of scribes trying not to wake one another, their reed pens drying out while they snoozed in poetic solidarity. The culture here didn't see naps as laziness, they were part of intellectual hygiene. A well-rested mind was a capable mind. Even the library's maintenance crew had nap privileges. One administrative record from Lagash reads, "Janitor Kala allowed to sleep third hour of moonrise. He dreams of clean shelves." You chuckle. Imagine your office job including scheduled dream breaks, with clay discs to prove it. You take one final look at the walls of palm-sized dream tablets. There's something timeless here. The idea that inside every civilization, no matter how complex or bustling, there is a quiet room where people are simply allowed to drift, then wake, and write, and wonder. You trace your fingers over the smooth clay of one particularly worn dream. A library grew legs. It walked into the sky. I followed. Maybe you're still following it. You follow that dream-inscribed corridor out of the dream catalog chamber, your fingers still tingling from the cool touch of clay. Ahead, the light dims once again, and the scent of burning sesame oil and clay tablets grows stronger, signaling your next destination, the scribe's lounge. But this is no bustling writer's den. No, this is where the writers don't write. This is where they nap. Officially. The scribe's lounge, or more formally, the chamber of recovered ink, served a crucial, if understated, purpose, keeping the minds and eyes of the scribes in good enough shape to continue documenting the entire universe, one wedge mark at a time. You duck your head under a low lintel, and before you even adjust to the half-darkness, you hear it, the gentle sound of synchronized breathing. Not snoring, of course. That would have earned a firm tap with a reed stylus. But breathing. Dozens of slow, measured, library-sanctioned sighs, scribes arranged in neat rows, reclining on low mats, with small reed screens between each pair to promote mental separation during rest. You read that on a nearby wall inscription. Naturally. And here's the fascinating part, they weren't just allowed to nap. They were required to. Library policy dictated that any scribe working more than 2 hours with uninterrupted stylus use had to take a restorative pause of no less than 40 minutes. The clay logbooks show regular intervals of ink coolings, when styluses were dipped in water, blotted dry, and tucked into reed containers while their owners turned sideways and drifted off. Was this for health? Productivity? Divination? Historians still argue whether these mandated nap periods were a physical necessity, or a sacred ritual to keep scribes in tune with the divine rhythms of knowledge. Some claim it was inspired by lunar cycles, others say it was just very early HR policy. You inch past a row of low stone shelves filled with scribal blankets. Not fabric, of course, these were woven mats of tightly coiled date palm fibers, sometimes layered with river-washed silk scraps. Luxurious? Hardly. But enough to buffer the chill of the clay floor. One corner even contains a gently bubbling clay jar labeled, "Stylus Soak Water." It's warm. Not for styluses, you realize, but for hands. Scribes would dip their fingers into it before and after naps, partly to relax the joints, partly to symbolically wash off the thoughts of the dream world before returning to the waking ink. A scribe named Talu left a cheeky note etched on the base of his nap bench. Do not wake me unless the library is on fire. Or unless you've brought figs. Scribes like Talu worked with a language that was both elegant and exhausting, Cuneiform required meticulous precision, and long hours bent over tablets meant necks, backs, and wrists turned into knots tighter than a Sumerian tax code. Nap time wasn't indulgent, it was survival. The librarians, as they were occasionally called, though not always flatteringly, had their own unwritten competition, the most creative place to doze. One favorite was behind the tall inventory shelf of duplicate grain tax records. So boring, even the rats wouldn't go near them. Perfect napping nook. And if you happened to snore? Well, the library had a system for that, too. A small basket sits atop a shelf nearby, filled with smooth pebbles. Each pebble is inscribed with a pictogram of a reed, a fish, or a stylus. If a napping scribe started making too much noise, another could gently place a pebble near their mat as a polite warning. 3 pebbles? You'd be bumped to the public nap garden until further notice. High stakes in the low-energy game. As you examine a set of these pebbles, you find one shaped into a turtle, a rare carving for such mundane purposes. A side inscription reveals: carved for scribe Bala, who dreamed he was a turtle 19 days in a row. Commitment to a theme. Respect. You recline on one of the unused mats, testing its give. It's not plush, but it's oddly comforting, like the firmness of an old couch in your childhood home. Your shoulders sink slightly, and you can imagine what it was like to close your eyes surrounded by the gentle scratch of reed mats and the faint scent of baked clay and cedar ink. One dusty tablet fragment, broken cleanly in half, catches your eye nearby. Its message: napped too long. Ink dried. Tablet cracked. Blame the moon. We've all had days like that. On a small shelf tucked behind the napping mat sits a row of curious figurines, miniature lions, owls, and one very chubby donkey. These weren't for play. They were protective talismans, meant to guard the dreaming minds of the scribes. Or, more practically, to warn others not to steal your stylus while you were asleep. And on the wall, painted in reddish ochre, is the library's most beloved proverb, one memorized by every apprentice on their first day. A tired scribe writes crooked lines. A rested one writes the world straight. As you stretch your legs, a breeze brushes past from an upper window, carrying the sound of a reed flute from somewhere farther down the hall. It's likely the awakening tune, a soft melody played when nap time officially ends. Not all scribes liked it. Some records show complaints filed against too cheerful fluting before sunrise. But that's the beauty of this place. Even complaints were gently carved, lovingly kept, and probably napped over again later. You leave the scribe's lounge feeling deeply understood. Finally, a workplace that valued rest, softness, and the occasional turtle-themed existential crisis, you shuffle quietly away from the scribe's lounge, still enveloped in that serene, shared exhale of collective rest. The floor beneath your sandals changes subtly, more polished, as if by thousands of lazy-footed scholars. You're heading deeper now, toward the most controversial room in the entire Sumerian library complex, the debate alcove. A space where people whispered, while trying very hard not to. It's smaller than you expect. Circular. Low ceiling. The walls curve inward like an upside-down bowl, designed to catch sound. Which is funny, because this was the one place people weren't supposed to speak above a whisper. The Sumerians called it Nigen Z, roughly, circle of respectful objection. You duck your head and enter. Inside, 7 low stone seats are arranged around a central clay brazier. Not for fire, but for warmth via hot sand. A gentle heat radiates up from the center, relaxing your calves and thighs. No ink. No styluses. No scrolls. Just talking, and even then, only during permitted hours. See, every major library in Sumer had one of these alcoves. They weren't just about books or tablets, they were about thought. And as much as the scribes valued silence and structure, they also believed that knowledge had to be chewed, mulled, and occasionally challenged. Preferably while reclining. But not too loudly. You spot an etching on the bench nearest you. Speak as softly as a tortoise walks. Beneath it, a second line, scratched hastily in smaller glyphs, unless you're losing the argument. Here, respected elders, apprentice librarians, and visiting scholars would come to discuss pressing issues. Should lunar omens override legal precedent? Were barley exports a sign of divine favor or just good irrigation? Had the god Enlil really meant that when he appeared in the dream of Zuma the accountant? Historians still argue whether these debates had any formal impact on city policy, or if they were just social rituals to bond the intellectual elite. Some believe minutes were secretly carved and stored, others say the scribes intentionally left them unrecorded, respecting the sanctity of open thought. The topics varied wildly. One recovered record, chiseled unusually onto the back of a broken offering bowl, lists heated discussions such as: can animals have dreams? Is silence a form of worship? If clay is sacred, should we be walking on it? One particular librarian named Edna was famous for wearing a wool scarf during every debate, which he claimed muffled the heat of his opinions. He also once fell asleep mid-argument and was woken up only when his opponent began quoting him back to himself. As you move from seat to seat, you notice something strange. Each bench has a different texture. One is smooth and cool, another pitted and warm. It turns out, each seat was reserved for a different temperament. The hot bench? For passionate speakers, often apprentices. The cold one? For the listeners, usually elders, who weren't allowed to interrupt. And the bumpy one? Punishment. If you'd spoken too loudly last session, you were stuck with the uneven seat until you learned restraint. Talk about seating with consequences. Atop a central shelf lies a cracked reed box. Inside are fragments of what look like argument tokens. They're tiny clay tiles marked with phrases: request clarification, offer compromise, cite source, if known. Debaters would pass these to one another like sleepy poker chips, minimizing interruptions and maximizing thoughtful exchange. The box lid reads, "Words weigh more when whispered." But what about disagreements? There was a peculiar custom, revived only once every 10 years, known as silent feuds. If two scholars truly clashed, say, over the spiritual status of fermented fish, they could enter a 3-day period of structured silence. They would pass clay tablets back and forth, each inscribed with no more than 10 words per hour. At the end, a neutral scribe would judge who won based on clarity, elegance, and who needed fewer nap breaks. One tablet fragment from such a feud reads: "Fish are divine if they speak in dreams." The reply, chipped neatly in response: "That was indigestion, not divinity." Academia, folks. A curious side note, some city rulers occasionally visited the debate alcove in disguise, just to listen. Dressed as minor temple workers, they'd sit silently, absorbing the unfiltered opinions of their brightest citizens. There's even a rumor, though never confirmed, that one king of Lagash rewrote a trade policy entirely based on a sleepy debate about sesame prices held in this very room. And every so often, the debates got sleepy. Literally. If someone dozed off mid-session, they were not scolded. In fact, the group would pause for 1 full hour, in what they called the soft silence. It was believed that if someone's body needed to rest, their mind was likely doing its best thinking. And if 2 or more fell asleep? Session adjourned. You glance around now and realize it's happening again. The temperature, the quiet, the soft pulse of sand-warmed air, all of it conspires to slow your breathing. Your thoughts drift. What would you debate, if you could? Whether sleep is the body's ink? Whether dreams deserve footnotes? Maybe it doesn't matter. Here in the debate alcove, questions live longer than answers. And sometimes, a whisper is louder than a declaration. You stand and pad softly away, leaving the warmth behind you and carrying the quiet forward. There's still more library to see. But now you understand, knowledge wasn't just carved into tablets, it was also steeped in stillness, and softened by sleep. You step softly out of the debate alcove, your limbs a little looser, your thoughts a little floatier. The scent of warm sand lingers faintly in your hair. But now, your path curves downward, a gently spiraling ramp, carved into the very clay underbelly of the library itself. There's a cooler draft here, kissed with the mineral scent of damp stone and faint hints of ancient herbs. You've arrived at the medicinal archive. Most visitors to Sumerian libraries never ventured this deep. This section wasn't just about scholarship, it was about health. The clay shelves here are narrower, the tablet labels tinged with reddish mineral ink that survives the centuries. It's darker, more humid, and packed with knowledge that could either heal your scorpion sting, or knock you out cold for 12 hours straight. In fact, that's how most people got here, on purpose, seeking sleep. See, while Sumerian medicine was far from modern science, it had its own peculiar logic, blending observation, magic, and a very practical kind of trial and error. And nowhere was this truer than in the section labeled Ininu sub Liberare, or Scrolls of Safe Forgetting. Which sounds poetic, until you realize it refers to sleep-inducing recipes and rituals. You pause at one particularly cracked tablet, titled simply, To Stop Thinking. It prescribes a paste of crushed poppy pods, 1 spoon of cooled date wine, rubbed gently into the soles of the feet, while a friend chants, Ninlil sees you not. Simple, effective, and slightly unsettling. Sumerian librarians took sleep seriously, so seriously that every major library employed at least one sleep attendant, or degugmu, tasked with helping restless visitors cross the veil respectfully. Not all knowledge was meant to be read in a frenzy. Some of it had to be dreamt. Historians still argue whether these attendants functioned more like priests, nurses, or glorified librarians. Their robes were dark indigo, their breath always minty, and they were known to hum lullabies written in cuneiform meter. They did not speak unless spoken to, and even then, they replied with gestures first. It wasn't just tablets. In clay urns labeled with sleepy turtle glyphs, you find bundles of dried herbs still faintly aromatic, crushed coriander, marshmallow root, and something sharp and musky you're not quite sure you should be sniffing. One labeled Dream Keeper was burned at the head of someone's sleeping mat to encourage good visions. Another, bluntly called Nose Leaf, was used to stop snoring, by stuffing a leaf gently into one nostril. A brave strategy. Oddly enough, librarians sometimes wrote nighttime notes in special ink that faded with sunlight exposure. These whisper tablets were meant for use under moonlight or oil lamp. Scribes believed certain facts only needed to live for one night, to settle the mind and melt away with the dawn. One sleepy inscription reads, "My mother's recipes end here. I forget her voice with love." And another, more humorous. "Note to self, stop arguing with goats in dreams. In this room, even the air feels medicinal." You settle on a stool next to a gently bubbling water basin, used to infuse reed slips with calming vapors. You inhale, slowly. Your eyelids begin to droop just a little. The Sumerians weren't trying to sedate everyone, just decelerate them. Records suggest that kings sometimes visited these archives incognito. One famous tale tells of King Uarnamu slipping into a library wrapped in servant's cloth, desperate to fall asleep after 4 nights of divine dreams and royal guilt. He supposedly asked for the bitter scroll, took one sniff, and passed out mid-sentence. To preserve the tranquility, this archive enforced the strictest napping protocol in the entire city. Here were the golden rules of library sleep. No snoring above a whisper, punishable by mint sap on the nose. No dreaming of work, enforced by a chalk charm placed under the pillow. If one foot slips off the mat, the nap ends. If 2 nap side by side, they must face opposite directions, to prevent gossip in dreams. These rules were carved into the walls, alongside gentle mantras like, "Even Enki sleeps when the river stills." A fringe detail, but a fascinating one, the library's most expensive tablet, decorated with lapis lazuli borders, was not a spell, or law, or poem. It was a nap log. Yes. A clay record of every library worker's sanctioned naps across a full year. It included names, durations, posture notes, and even dreams remembered. One entry reads: Seba. Second moon cycle. 3 naps. No drool. Dream, walking across barley. Another. Erectii. 5th cycle. 1 nap. Excessive twitching. Dream, teeth made of millet. You run your fingers along the edge of this nap tablet, careful not to disturb the flaking detail. And for a moment, you realize, these weren't just people cataloging knowledge. They were archiving rest, dignifying it, tracking it, making it part of the intellectual life. In this quiet, herb-scented chamber, you can almost feel your pulse slow. You're beginning to understand something deeper. The Sumerians didn't just permit naps. They revered them. They believed a mind softened by slumber was a vessel made more absorbent. And sometimes, the best ideas, like the best dreams, come only when you stop reaching for them. You breathe in one more time. And as you rise, stretching lightly, you glance back at the fading ink and whispered prayers scratched into the stone walls. Sleep wasn't a break from knowledge. It was a continuation of it. You take your time climbing back up from the medicinal archive. The walls of the spiral passage feel warmer now, as if they've absorbed the last 2,000 years of stories and are ready to exhale them in one long, slow breath. You reach the upper level again, but instead of turning toward the tablet rooms or the scroll racks, you follow a little used hallway behind the staircase, past a low arch with a chipped lintel. This is where the napping policies get serious. Welcome to the designated sleep courtyard, or as the Sumerian clerks cheekily called it, the place where knowledge rests too. It's open to the sky, walled in on 4 sides by high mud brick panels, each decorated with soft glyphs of sleeping goats, reclining scribes, and, curiously, a very drowsy lion wearing spectacles. In the center, a dry fountain shaped like a reading eye gently collects dew on cool mornings. The sand under your feet is warm, packed, and covered in tidy, hand-woven reed mats. This was where official naps happened. Unlike the more casual dozes taken beside clay ovens or during long tablet readings, naps here were registered, assigned even. Every library visitor, from adolescent apprentice to cranky visiting bureaucrat, was required to log at least 1 sanctioned nap per moon cycle if they remained in the building more than 5 days. Skipping your nap could result in revocation of scroll privileges or, worse, being publicly assigned the title, Dust-Eyed One. Librarians posted stylized nap schedules on reed boards, using color-coded wax. Blue wax meant deep nap, while pale yellow meant quiet rest only, no dreams encouraged. If you were caught snoring during yellow hours, the consequence was being asked to recite a sleepy poem aloud to a room of similarly exhausted peers. And yes, it was as awkward as it sounds. This practice stemmed from a belief that certain types of knowledge, especially legal codes, crop cycles, and lunar omens, were too sharp to be absorbed while fully awake. They had to be softened by sleep first. Think of it as the intellectual version of soaking your lentils overnight. Historians still argue whether this mandatory nap policy was spiritual, hygienic, or a sneaky way to enforce social equality, because once you've napped next to the high priest's nephew, you're probably less afraid to ask him about barley taxes. Nap mats were assigned by height, not rank, a surprisingly democratic system. Each mat had a clay medallion pressed into the wall above it, listing the previous napper's name, dream quality, using a 3-star system, and favorite historical tablet. You pause at one that reads, Dumuzi white medium star favorite scroll, on the migration habits of river ducks. There's even evidence of gentle pranks performed during courtyard naps, mats occasionally sprinkled with crushed mint, a feather slipped under someone's elbow to provoke a twitch. But any prank that interrupted another's dream ritual was harshly punished. One legend tells of a scribe exiled for a month simply for whispering riddles into his rival's sleeping ear. And in the corner of the courtyard, there's a special wall, worn smoother than the rest. This was the dream journal wall. You crouch beside it. Its surface is scrawled with overlapping inscriptions, carved quickly by drowsy fingers as visitors awoke. There's a kind of desperation to the writing, as if people were racing to record their inner journeys before waking logic swallowed them whole. Some entries are oddly profound. I followed a star that turned into my grandmother. Others lean charmingly mundane. Dreamed of rice, but it smelled like figs. Confusing. And then there's the mysterious. The fish told me I was late. I apologized. He gave me a scroll. Sumerian dream theory was flexible. They believed dreams could be literal messages from gods, previews of political upheaval, or even just your body's way of demanding a snack. And the act of writing your dream on this wall helped unload it from your mind, so new thoughts could move in. To complete the nap ritual, one had to slowly trace their own name on the dream wall, while exhaling. It was believed that if you held your breath while doing so, the dream would follow you around all day like a stubborn dog. Of course, not everyone took these things seriously. One cheeky visitor simply etched. Slept. No dreams. October 10th would nap again. Still, the space feels sacred. Peaceful. Unpretentious in its reverence for rest. Here, among the clay and palm shadows, you feel time slow. Not in a lazy way, more like a firm hand on the shoulder saying, "Hey, it's okay to stop thinking for a bit." You recline on one of the reed mats, just to see what it's like. The mat gives a little. The sun warms your cheek. You imagine the procession of nappers who came before, scribes, shepherds, librarians, priests, all of them down here, under the open sky, dreaming of ducks, gods, barley, or maybe nothing at all. A small breeze rustles the corners of a nearby tablet stack. And for the first time since entering this city of clay and hush, you don't feel the urge to read or walk or observe. You just want to rest. After all, the Sumerians didn't nap to escape work. They napped so their work would mean something when they returned to it. And so, the last thing you see before closing your eyes is the fading outline of the drowsy lion with spectacles. He looks like he's about to tell you a bedtime story. But he doesn't need to. You're already in one. Let the story slip away now. Let the gentle clatter of ancient tablets fade to a soft whisper. You've walked the halls, climbed the ramps, and rested on the very mats where dusty scholars once dreamt of gods, goats, and grammar. Let the scent of parchment and palm oil drift from your thoughts. The courtyard sun is setting now, casting gold across the clay, and the library closes not with a bang or bell, but with the slow, contented sigh of centuries gone by. You are no longer a visitor here. You are part of the quiet. A breath. A pause. A space between scrolls. And in this pause, in this place of sanctioned sleep and recorded dreams, you can let go. No decisions. No lists. Just the faint, imagined hum of a librarian turning a page. Maybe they're humming. Maybe it's your breath. Let the weight of the day settle gently beside you. Let your shoulders unclench, your jaw soften, your feet rest. The lion blinks once. The wind forgets your name. And you dream not of grand things, but of little ones, pebbles, herbs, the echo of sandals on baked earth. Sleep well, traveler. Tomorrow's stories can wait.